Welcome, anime enthusiasts! Are you ready for a mind-blowing ride into the world of Huka? This anime is all about a super genius boy who will leave you in awe. If you're a fan of legendary characters like Light Yagami and the brilliant Ayanokoji, then maybe this show is your next obsession. But no worries, no spoilers allowed here. Let's jump right into the epic recap of Huka and get ready to have your mind blown.
Hotaro, the protagonist of this anime, appeared to be your typical high school student, having just stepped into high school, but his view of the world was decidedly bleak, shrouded in shades of gray. His introverted nature led him to adopt a personal motto. He would only engage in tasks deemed necessary, approaching them with utmost speed and efficiency. In modern-day Japan, he resided with his family, yet he embraced a solitary existence, detesting the idea of leading a vibrant life. Interestingly, his outlook bore a resemblance to yours, wouldn't you say? On this eventful first day of school, Hotaro had resolved to spend the coming years in solitude, conserving his energy and avoiding fruitless pursuits that yielded no results. As he entered the campus, he was disheartened by the high-energy students eagerly coaxing newcomers to join their clubs. Brushing past them, he stored his shoes in the locker and proceeded to his class, where he reunited with Satoshi, his best and only friend, who had been a part of his life for as long as he could remember. Knowing Hotaro's idiosyncrasies and his philosophy of achieving tasks with minimal effort, Satoshi encouraged him for the new day, brimming with possibilities. But Hotaro remained devoid of enthusiasm, questioning the very purpose of continuing with school when he would promptly return home once classes were over. Nevertheless, he handed Satoshi a letter with a sigh. The letter, received from Hotaro's sister currently in India, implored him to join the Classic Literature Club, a venture seldom undertaken by students. She revealed that each year fewer students showed interest, and she feared the club's imminent closure. Her special connection with the literature club drove her plea for Hotaro to join and prevent its demise. Deeply caring for his sister, Hotaro ultimately agrees to her request, especially when she assures him that joining the literature club would pose no difficulties since he'd be the sole member, granted the whole classroom to himself. The prospect of not having to expend energy on interacting with others slightly brightens his mood, and he bids farewell to Satoshi before heading to the staff room to obtain the key. Grateful that the club's room is situated in a secluded part of the school, he unlocks the door and enters. To his surprise, he finds a short, black-haired girl gazing out of the window. The girl introduces herself as Iru, claiming that she and Hotaro had been in the orientation together. This shocks Hotaro, as he had not noticed her amidst the crowd of students. Iru shares that she joined the club for personal reasons and inquires whether Hotaro has also joined. Quickly, he declines, believing that now that the club has a member, it will survive, and she won't need to join any other clubs. As he turns to leave, he asks her to lock the door upon her departure. However, Iru informs him that she cannot lock it and doesn't possess the keys. Perplexed, Hotaro retrieves the keys from his pocket and hands them to her. He questions how she managed to lock herself in without the keys, and she appears equally puzzled, unaware that the door was locked in the first place. Intrigued by the mystery, she becomes determined to uncover how the door was locked without the keys. In the meantime, Satoshi enters the classroom, having come to check on Hotaro, and Iru becomes entangled in the enigma. Despite Hotaro's attempts to leave, Iru grasps his hands and implores him to assist her in solving this perplexing puzzle. Overwhelmed by these unfamiliar emotions, Hotaro ultimately agrees and questions Iru if she noticed anything unusual. She explains that she heard a clanking sound before entering the room, and when they all listen carefully, they also hear the clinking noises. Together, they step outside and spot the janitor, who possesses the master key, closing up unoccupied rooms. They soon realize that the janitor assumed the literature club's room was empty due to its remote location and locked it without Iru realizing she was trapped from the inside. Satisfied to have unraveled the mystery, they walk together towards their lockers. Iru asks Satoshi if he'd like to join the club, and despite already being a part of multiple clubs, he agrees to join the literature club. Attempting to inform Satoshi that he won't be joining, Hotaro is once again halted by Iru, who holds his hands and earnestly implores him to become a member. Yielding to her touch and her heartfelt request, Hotaro eventually gives in and hands her his application card, officially making him an official member of the literature club. The following day, Hotaro arrives at school, and after the day's classes, finds himself compelled to stay back and work on an essay that was assigned for homework. Satoshi teases him for not completing the assignment on time, but Hotaro defends himself, claiming he merely forgot to bring it to school. Amused, Satoshi then shares a new mystery that emerged within the school. According to him, that morning, a girl was making her way up from the grounds during a rainy day. She heard a mesmerizing classical music melody emanating from the music room, despite the room being in complete darkness. Intrigued, she opened the door but was horrified to discover an empty piano and an apparently vacant room. The haunting melody persisted, and her heart raced with anxiety. As the piece neared its end, she felt a sudden chill down her spine, and from the floor, a disheveled figure with bloodshot eyes emerged. Stumbling toward the girl, she managed to close the door and swiftly ran away in fear. After finishing the story, Satoshi eagerly looks at Hotaru, but his unenthusiastic expression remains as he continues to write on the piece of paper. However, Satoshi wonders if the news of the mystery has spread across the school, and upon learning that it has become quite significant, he anticipates Iru will approach them seeking help to solve it. Acting quickly, Hotaru takes out another piece of paper and scribbles something before suggesting that Satoshi tell Iru a fictional story about the mystery of the secret clubhouse. True to his prediction, Iru arrives at that moment, entering the room and heading straight to their desk to inquire about the music room mystery. Hotaru skillfully interrupts and claims that Satoshi was telling him about a renowned school mystery, the enigmatic Classics Club. He weaves a tale about a ghostly club whose members and selection process remain shrouded in secrecy. Supposedly, they post a notice on the board every year, but only a chosen few can locate it. Iru is immediately captivated and asks for their assistance in finding it. As Hotaru finishes his essay, he assures Iru that he will help. They all search their floor's notice board but find nothing substantial. Eventually, Hotaru suggests checking the main notice board on the ground floor. They head there, only to discover a chaotic array of posters from various clubs vying for attention. Despite scrutinizing the board, they lose hope until Hotaru draws their attention to a small notice for the Classics Club hidden beneath one of the posters. However, Iru remains unimpressed, feeling that the mystery is riddled with inconsistencies. With time running out, they decide to part ways. While walking back together, Satoshi questions Hotaru about his creation of the lie and the poster for the Classics Club. Hotaru confesses that he simply didn't want to visit the music room because it was far from his usual path outside the school. Satoshi is in awe of Hotaru's deduction and bursts into laughter, curious if he knows the true mystery behind the music room. Hotaru calmly explains that the room is often occupied by passionate students who dedicate themselves entirely to music. The pianist in particular has a habit of sleeping inside the room to maximize her practice time. She closes the windows to avoid distractions and dozes off while playing a CD of classical music on a tape recorder, which acts as her alarm. When the music ends, she wakes up. Thus, when the student opened the room, she saw an empty piano but heard the music playing, and when it stopped, the pianist woke up, feeling groggy and with bloodshot eyes due to lack of rest. This unnerved the poor student, prompting her to flee in fright. Satoshi admires Hotaru's astute observation and playfully remarks that his energy-conserving ways will be challenged by Iru, who seems to have the power to motivate him. They bid each other goodbye and head home to finally get some well-deserved rest. As a month passes, Hotaru gradually settles into the new routine. Most of the time, he doesn't mind it much as he simply goes to the club after classes for a short while to read a book, which he enjoys. He particularly relishes the moments when Iru remains quiet and immersed in her own book. However, she has developed a cute habit of offering him some homemade sweets every time he settles down to read. One fine day, while engrossed in his book and savoring his tea, Iru suddenly stands up and expresses dissatisfaction with the club's monotonous nature. Hotaru advises her to sit down and avoid wasting energy on frivolous matters. Nonetheless, she continues to complain, desiring more engaging and fun activities for their club. Hotaru reminds her that their club is meant to be a literature club, not a sports club that needs to engage in various activities. However, Iru remains adamant, suggesting they should prepare for the upcoming school festival. Hotaru quickly dismisses the idea, stating his disinterest in participating in any school festival activities. Nevertheless, Iru won't be dissuaded and insists they create an anthology for the festival, citing the rich history of the literature club and its tradition of producing one each year. Hotaru flatly refuses, unwilling to invest so much energy in such a project and preferring something low effort instead. Iru persists, even challenging Hotaru's assumption that dealing with her constant pestering about the anthology would be less work than actually creating one. Frustrated, Hotaru finally agrees to her demand, but he can't help but ask if she has any idea how to create an anthology, to which she admits she doesn't. Hotaru questions Iru about how they will create the anthology if she has no idea how it's done, but she proposes finding copies of the previous year's anthologies and learning from them. Though frustrated by the additional work she's imposing on him, Hotaru refrains from complaining due to her dedication. They both start scouring the room for the anthologies, but their search proves futile. Hotaru sits down at his desk, thinking they're finished, but Iru insists they continue and drags him to the library, convinced they'll find the copies there. Upon arriving at the library, they encounter a short-haired girl named Ibara, who appears to know Hotaru and gives him a disapproving look. She warns him that he's not welcome if he's up to no good, but he cheekily responds, further irritating her. However, their interaction is interrupted as Satoshi enters the library, and Ibara's demeanor abruptly changes. Hotaru is puzzled but explains that Ibara used to like Satoshi during their middle school days when they were classmates. Satoshi possesses exceptional charm and can make anyone's heart flutter with his charming voice. Satoshi asks Hotaru what he's doing, and Hotaru humorously replies that it's more like a hostage situation as Iru, an absolute numbskull, forcibly dragged him from his seat where he was constantly glued, avoiding any movement outside the school. Satoshi laughs heartily at the banter and proceeds to introduce Iru and Ibara to each other. Iru wastes no time and directly asks Ibara if she has seen the previous year's anthology from the literature club. Ibara, looking at Hotaru with a smirk, questions how a loser like him managed to join a club, but he confidently retorts, telling her to shut her trap. Ibara then turns to Iru and admits that she doesn't know where the anthologies are but suggests they might be in the stack. Iru inquires about accessing the stack, but Ibara informs her that only the librarian can grant permission. Hotaru, fed up with the conversation, takes charge and starts walking toward the door with an air of confidence. However, Iru is determined to make his life difficult and stops him, insisting they wait for the librarian. As they continue to argue, Satoshi intervenes, asking Ibara to share the mystery she mentioned earlier. Hotaru thinks to himself that this ordeal seems never-ending. Ibara recounts the mystery, which piques Iru's curiosity. But Ibara, taking the reins, begins narrating the story. Ibara tells them that she has noticed a mysterious pattern in a book for some time now. She explains that she stays over in the library every Friday, and without fail, during the lunch break, someone borrows a book from the library and returns it by the end of the day. What's puzzling is that when you borrow a book, you can keep it for a week before returning it, but this person always brings it back the same day. Iru excitedly asks if she can have a look at the book, and Ibara shows her a beautiful hardcover leather-bound book about the history of the school. Everyone agrees that the book looks impressive. Meanwhile, Hotaru tries to ignore all of this and continues reading his book, hoping to retrieve the anthologies and go back home. However, Iru is determined to keep Hotaru engaged and keeps putting the book in front of his eyes, much to his annoyance. He tries to dismiss it as not being a big deal, suggesting that some students might just have free time during lunch. But Ibara interjects, informing him that different people borrow the same book every single week, following the same pattern of borrowing during lunch and returning it by the end of the day. This odd behavior raises intrigue, even though Hotaru tries to avoid getting involved. Iru persists in pestering him by placing the book in front of him, but Ibara finally tells them to settle down and not make noise in the library, silencing them. Hotaru looks at Iru hopefully, thinking she might back off, but she remains persistent and headstrong about solving the case. Reluctantly, Hotaru concedes, realizing that he won't be able to shake her off, and that resisting would be an inefficient use of energy. He sits down and starts racking his brain, telling them that this book is definitely not being used for literary purposes, as it would be impossible to read such a massive history book during lunchtime. Hotaru asserts that the book is being used for something other than its intended purpose, and seeks ideas from the group. Ibara suggests using the books as pillows or shields, but Iru stops the joking, knowing that's not the case. Hotaru hopes for a helpful suggestion from Iru, but she humorously suggests using the book as a pickle preserver, leaving Hotaru exasperated. Hotaru tries to connect the dots but fails to find any clues about the book's true purpose. He notices that all the borrowers were girls from Class 2 and proposes the idea of using the book as a signaling system with an upright position indicating yes, and inverted position as unknown. Ibara disagrees, showing them the random arrangement of books where she keeps them. With no definite answers, Hotaru feels at a loss, and Ibara taunts him for his lack of progress. Then, unexpectedly, Iru starts smelling the book, which surprises Ibara and makes her step back. Iru senses the scent of paint, but Ibara cannot detect anything. Suddenly, Hotaru has an epiphany and asks Iru to check something for him. Hotaru leads them to the art class, pointing out that the only class where girls from different sections come together on Fridays is the optional art class. He deduces that every girl who borrowed the book must have taken it to the art class. Inside the class, they are surprised to find that almost all the paintings being worked on feature a girl with a book. Hotaru explains that the book's beautiful leather-bound vintage cover and its perfect color make it an ideal subject for an art piece. He further suggests that students prefer to borrow the book on Fridays instead of carrying it around all week, returning it by the end of the day. Both Ibara and Iru are highly impressed by Hotaru's sharp deduction skills, leaving them in awe of his intellect. Nonetheless, they admire his abilities, and the mystery surrounding the book is finally solved, much to everyone's satisfaction. As they return to the library, the group engages in lively conversation while Hotaru observes from the sidelines, feeling like this is not what he had planned for his high school experience. He has no intention of making friends or creating lasting memories. His only goal is to do the bare minimum of work required. With this in mind, he tries to leave, but Iru stops him, reminding him that they are still waiting for the librarian to get the anthology. Finally, the librarian arrives, and Satoshi introduces himself and the others, inquiring about the literature club's anthology. However, the librarian informs them that the back issues are unfortunately not in the stacks, and they will need to search elsewhere. Everyone feels disheartened by this news, but Satoshi, always cheerful, assures them that they will find it eventually. For now, they all head back to their homes, ending their day at the school. The following morning, Haotoru receives an early call from Iru, interrupting his Sunday sleep. Annoyed, he questions the urgency, but Iru apologizes and insists on meeting him that day. Despite his attempts to avoid it, she pleads with him, and he eventually gives in. In the afternoon, Haotoru waits for Iru at a cafe, sipping his coffee as she arrives late, dressed in a pretty outfit. As they sit together, Iru seems hesitant to start the conversation, beating around the bush, which frustrates Haotoru. He threatens to leave if she doesn't get to the point, but she quickly confesses her nervousness. When he asks what she wants to say, she shyly admits that she has something to confess. Haotoru is taken aback by the revelation, and his heart pounds in his chest, thinking it was a love confession. However, Iru clarifies that she wants his help to solve a mystery, not confess her feelings. Haotoru feels a mix of disappointment and relief as he realizes he has been pranked by his own imagination. Iru shares that her uncle Siki used to study at their school 45 years ago and was once the president of the Classic Literature Club. He went on a trip to India, but communication with him suddenly stopped, and he was declared missing. Despite investigations, no trace of him was found. Iru fondly remembers the time she spent with her uncle, as he was kind, intelligent, and always willing to answer her questions and fuel her curiosity about the world. She acknowledges that Haotoru, in some ways, reminds her of her uncle due to his ability to solve mysteries and have answers to various questions. Iru continues her story, recounting the day she asked her uncle a question that triggered an unexpected response. Instead of his usual cheerful and informative answer, she recalls hearing something tense and sad in his voice. The impact of his words was so overwhelming that she couldn't help but burst into tears, crying uncontrollably. What struck her even more was that her usually composed uncle seemed equally affected by what he had said and sat there in silence, not attempting to console her. Eventually, her mother intervened and took her back to her room, where she cried herself to sleep, exhausted from the emotional turmoil. Haotoru listens attentively as Iru reveals a significant matter to him. She explains that she can't remember a crucial conversation with her uncle, and the distressing experience caused her to block it out completely from her memory. Pleading for his help, Iru seeks to uncover this lost memory that holds great importance in her life. Initially, Haotoru hesitates to take on such a responsibility, fearing the potential impact it could have on her personality and outlook. He suggests she seek help from other friends, but Iru values her privacy and trusts him due to his ability to think like her uncle. Despite his reservations, Haotoru eventually agrees to assist her with care and sensitivity. He acknowledges the weight of the task and the urgency to recall the forgotten conversation before her uncle's funeral. Iru had tried inquiring among teachers, but none knew her uncle well enough. He agrees to help her, but he clarifies that he won't be responsible for any impact on her mental well-being. Iru appreciates his assistance and assures him that she understands. As the days pass, the midterm examinations approach, and all club activities, including the literature club, are put on hold for students to focus on their exams. Haotoru spends his time studying diligently and interacting mostly with Satoshi, who is in the same class. Once the exams are over, he receives a letter from his sister in Istanbul, explaining that something went wrong with her passport, but she's currently safe at the Japanese embassy. She asks about Hotaro's experience in the literature club and inquires about other members. She reminds him about the school festival approaching and the tradition of creating an anthology. The crucial information she shares is that the previous year's anthology copies are kept inside a chemical locking safe in the club room, easily accessible since it's not locked. Hotaru is relieved that they won't have to search extensively for the anthologies now. The next day, they all gather inside the club room, and surprisingly, Ibarra is now a member of the literature club as well. Hotaru can't believe his luck, as he now has even more girls around him. He shares the contents of the letter with them, and they all express their happiness about finding the previous year's anthologies. However, upon searching the club room, they realize that there is no locking safe there. They start to panic, but Hotaru stays calm and explains that the club rooms might have been changed at the beginning of the new session. They decide to visit the staff room to inquire about the previous year's classrooms for the clubs. Hotaru informs them that he has already done that, and last year, the Literature Club used the biology lab as their base of operations. Both Iru and Ibara are impressed by his quick investigation skills. As they head towards the biology lab, Hotaru hopes they have forgotten about him, but Iru comes back and pulls him along with them. Hotaru leads the way to the biology room and notices two small boxes attached to either side of the hallways, which piques his suspicion. However, he doesn't mention it to the girls. When they arrive at the room, a long-haired senior comes out and appears uneasy, trying to cover the open door. He informs them that the room is currently occupied by the newspaper club, and he's the only one there that day as no other members showed up. Hotaru detects a strong smell of room freshener coming from him. Iru explains that she is the president of the literature club, and they need to retrieve the locking safe with their anthologies. The senior reacts strangely to the mention of the locker, denying any knowledge of it being there. The trio insists that the locker must be inside somewhere since the room was used by the literature club last year, but the senior firmly denies its presence. Initially, Hotaru decides they should leave, but Ibara and Iru persist, expressing the difficulty of searching the entire school for the back issues. Hotaru, not wanting to go through that much trouble, stays. Ibara asserts that they have the right to look inside the classroom. After some consideration, the senior reluctantly allows them to have a quick look, cautioning them not to disturb anything. They enter the room, and Hotaru notices papers scattered on the table along with a radio device. The open window and fan blowing towards it seem suspicious. Iru returns, unable to find the safe, which seems to relieve the senior. However, Hotaru asks if they moved anything, and the senior admits they moved some cardboard boxes around. Hotaru quickly insists that they need to search the entire room due to the mess, as they have no idea where things might be hidden. The senior becomes agitated, expressing his lack of time and concern for his belongings. Despite Hotaru's promise to put everything back, the senior tells him to leave and get out of the club room. The girls appear scared, but Hotaru stands his ground and threatens to have a staff member search the room. This frightens the senior, and he agrees to let them search. Hotaru assures him that they only want the anthologies, and if he finds them, he should leave them in the literature club's classroom. The senior reluctantly agrees, goes outside with the girls, and tells them to wait near the library. When they return to their club room later, they are surprised to find the back issues neatly stacked on their table. Ibara and Iru examine the volumes, and Ibara asks Hotaru how he knew the senior had the books. He takes her aside and asks her to keep it a secret. Hotaru explains to Ibara that he noticed the infrared sensors in the hallway, and the senior's suspicious behavior raised red flags. The strong Kalan, the open windows, and the fan pointed towards the window suggested that the senior was smoking inside the room and used the radio device to be alerted of anyone approaching. As a student from a prestigious family, getting caught smoking on school grounds would bring shame to his family's name. Hotaru believes that the cigarettes and lighter are hidden inside the locking safe. Their discussion is interrupted by Satoshi, who enters the room dressed as a sunflower. Ibara shows him the found back issues, while Hotaru talks privately with Iru. She reveals that the name Huka was what she asked her uncle about, which made her cry. She hands over the issue containing her uncle's name, which mentions an event that happened 45 years ago in the literature club. Hotaru begins reading the contents of the issue. The anthology revealed that Siki had left the high school a year ago, leaving behind a legacy of being a hero and an inspiration to all. Despite Iru's best efforts, she couldn't remember the exact words her uncle said that day, causing her distress. Hotaru checks the anthology's issue number, finding it to be the second one, but the first issue is missing. They decide to call it a day. On their way back, Hotaru questions why Iru didn't involve Satoshi and Ibara. Reluctantly, she agrees to share the problem with them the next day. The following day, Iru explains everything to Satoshi and Ibara, and they both pledge support in uncovering the mystery from 45 years ago. They plan to meet at Iru's place with theories about the past. On the next Sunday, they gather, and Hotaru contemplates his lack of energy compared to Satoshi's vibrant personality. They cycle to the countryside to discuss the mystery further, and Hotaru reflects on his different nature compared to Satoshi's positive outlook on life. As they arrive at Iru's enormous residence, Hotaru observes that he prefers a more monotonous and low-key life, unlike Satoshi's energetic and extroverted personality. Inside the house, they wander through several well-preserved rooms that exude a sense of history and timelessness. Finally, they gather in a room where Ibara is already seated on the floor. Iru begins the meeting, explaining that they will each share their theories one by one about what happened 45 years ago. Iru's theory involves a bunch of troublemakers infiltrating the festival and causing havoc. Siki, as the president of the literature club, stands up against the injustice and rallies the students to push the troublemakers out. However, in the process, he might have gotten violent and punched one of the troublemakers, leading to his expulsion from the school. While they appreciate Iru's theory, the others express doubts about its likelihood. As they discuss Iru's theory, Hotaru and the others raise valid points that contradict the possibility of punks infiltrating the festival. Punk culture only emerged 40 years ago, while the event they are investigating occurred 45 years ago. Moreover, the school strictly prohibits money-centric stalls at the festival, making it unlikely for troublemakers to forcefully get money. Next, Ibarra shares her theory, suggesting that the school might have faced government intervention aimed at propagandizing students. In response, the school community, including teachers and students, united to resist the propaganda, leading to strikes and protests. Seiki must have been a prominent leader in these protests, catching the attention of the government, resulting in his expulsion. With their theories discussed, Satoshi expresses hunger, prompting Eru to invite them inside the kitchen for a discussion while she prepares omelettes for him. Satoshi delights in Yuru's homemade omelettes, causing Ibarra to feel irritated. While enjoying the meal, Satoshi presents his theory with newspaper clippings from 45 years ago, suggesting a power struggle between students and teachers. The dispute might have been about reducing the festival days and emphasizing academic focus. According to Satoshi, Seiki must have punched a teacher during these protests, leading to his expulsion. However, Hotaru points out a flaw in the theory. The protests occurred in June, while Seiki's departure happened in October, leaving a significant time gap that doesn't match the events. Feeling the pressure to contribute something new, Hotaru suddenly becomes self-conscious and makes an excuse to go to the washroom, seeking time to think about his own theory. Yuru provides him with the directions to the washroom, and as he makes his way there, he notices a room that belongs to Iru. Curiosity gets the better of him, and he peeks inside to find Eru diligently working on compiling all the theories. Seeing her dedication, Hotaru feels a pang of guilt for his lack of effort. Inside the washroom, he decides to change his approach and commits to putting in serious effort. He racks his brain, desperately trying to come up with a theory that could unravel the mystery. After a few minutes of intense thinking, he emerges from the washroom with newfound determination. Sitting down with his friends, he announces that he might have landed on something crucial. Hotaru presents his theory, emphasizing that this mystery involves multiple components. The incident occurred in June, and Seiki left the school in October, leaving several months in between. He highlights that the event took place within the high school premises, and there were two rival factions represented by the monthly newsletter, the students and the teachers. According to him, the root cause of this conflict was the teachers exerting their power over decision-making, which resulted in denying the students something they passionately desired. Hotaru's theory gains everyone's attention as he carefully pieces together the events surrounding the mystery. He suggests that the point of contention between the students and teachers was the school festival, which the students collectively cherished for its autonomy and creative expression. The teachers wanted to reduce the festival's duration from 5 to 3 days, leading to protests and discontent among the students. Seiki must have been a prominent figure in these protests, catching the teachers' attention and making him a target. However, the teachers couldn't immediately remove him due to his hero-like status among the students, so they waited for the situation to calm down before finally finding a way to kick him out on unrelated grounds. When Seiki left, he did so like a legend, which is why issue number 2 of the anthology hailed him as such. While the theory seems bulletproof, Yuru is still left with a lingering question about why she cried when her uncle told her this story when she was young. Hotaru admits he has no answer to that, and Yuru still appears somewhat dissatisfied. Despite this, she thanks Hotaru for his help, as the mystery surrounding her uncle has finally been resolved. The group feels a sense of closure, knowing what happened 45 years ago. Hotaru is lost in his thoughts as he arrives home, reflecting on the day's events and the conversations he had with his friends. He starts to contemplate his feelings towards Eru and whether he is just envious of the vibrant lives his friends lead compared to his own gray existence. However, he dismisses the idea that he likes Eru and attributes his newfound investment in the mystery to his desire for a more colorful life. As he ponders, he recalls the moments he spent with Eru, how the world seemed different and more vibrant when she was around. He wonders if Seiki felt the same way during his time at the school. However, his thoughts are interrupted by a phone call, and he quickly picks it up. Hotaru receives a call from his sister, who shares that she has moved to a new country and is enjoying herself. He updates her on his recent adventures, and then mentions the anthology he's been working on, particularly Huka. His sister becomes intrigued, recalling Hugo, one of her favorites, and asks about the tragedy of the kind-hearted Hiroshiki. Hotaru is puzzled as he believes Seiki's departure was legendary and happy, not tragic. He asks his sister for more details, but she abruptly ends the call. Returning to his room, Hotaru reflects on the incomplete story and theory he has pieced together. He realizes that for most people, high school is a time of happiness and rosy experiences, but for Seiki, it was cut short, leading to a gray life after leaving school. He wonders if such a person can truly be happy, uncovering a darker truth behind the facade. The following day, Hotaru gathers Ibarra, Eru, and Satoshi for a meeting in the club room. He admits that a part of the story remains hidden and shrouded in mystery. Eru agrees, feeling that something is missing. Hotaru assures him that together, they will fill in the gaps and uncover the whole truth. Ibara inquires about the missing parts of Hotaru's theory, and Satoshi questions if the theory is flawed. Hotaru clarifies that he doesn't think the story is entirely wrong, but certain subtleties have led it in the wrong direction. He suggests delving deeper into the foreword of Huka, which mentions the word sacrifice. Hotaru points out that sacrifice can be interpreted both as something to be proud of and as something sorrowful, and they need to understand what kind of sacrifice is referred to in the context. Satoshi remarks that determining the exact meaning of the word would be challenging, and to find out for sure, they need to identify the original author. Hotaru confirms that is precisely their plan. He surprises Satoshi by revealing that he has researched and discovered the name of the author. He hands a paper to Ibara, asking her if the name rings any bells. Ibara's eyes widen in realization as she confirms that the author of Huka is none other than the librarian. Satoshi questions if they are sure it's the same person, considering others might share the same name. Hotaru explains that he cross-referenced the librarian's age with the timeline and inquired from others, confirming that she is indeed the same person who was part of the Classic Literature Club 45 years ago. With an appointment already set, Hotaru urges everyone to hurry and speak to the librarian. They gather their belongings and head to the library. Inside, they find the librarian still arranging books. She greets them with a smile, mentioning that she has some work to finish, but is open to talking while doing so. Iru immediately helps her with the books, while Hotaru brings up the foreword from Huka and inquires if she wrote it. The librarian confirms that she indeed wrote it and believes they are all here to ask about the events of 45 years ago. She inquired about their curiosity regarding the events that occurred half a century ago and wondered why they were interested in such a gloomy period. In response, Iru revealed that Siki was her uncle, and she wanted to uncover what happened to him all those years ago. She asked Eri about Siki's well-being, to which Eri informed them that he had gone missing in India, and there had been no communication from him for the past 7 years. Intrigued by their interest, they asked Eri to provide more details about the events that unfolded 45 years ago and whether Hotaru's theory was accurate. Eri questioned which theory they were referring to, and Iru explained that Hotaru had formulated a hypothesis about what might have led to Siki's expulsion. Eri became interested and invited them to her office. Once settled, Eri carefully reviewed the notes Hotaru had prepared and expressed surprise at the level of detail in his theory. She commented that it felt as if he had been present during the events. However, Hotaru admitted that he believed some parts of the theory were incomplete, and he wanted to know whether Siki took the expulsion on behalf of all students and whether the school willingly accepted it, or if there was more to the story. Eri looked down sorrowfully and confirmed that he was right, and there was a missing piece to the story. She recollected a time when she was much younger and had recently joined the high school. During that period, school festivals were significant occasions, and the entire city would be abuzz with students eager to participate in the festivities. The atmosphere was electric, and the school festival held immense importance for all students during that era. However, the year she enrolled in high school, the school festival went a bit too far, leading to clashes among the students. As a result, the principal made a drastic decision to cut down the school festival from 5 days to just 2 days, leaving a profound impact on everyone. Amid strict regulations imposed on the students, the entire school was thrown into chaos. Protests, rallies, and banners emerged, culminating in a movement where the students were determined to assert their demands on the principal. However, the leader of the movement chose to remain anonymous, knowing that severe consequences awaited the person in charge once the uproar subsided. As the protest gained momentum, the teachers eventually yielded, reinstating the 5-day festival instead of the 3-day plan. The celebration that ensued on that fateful night saw students burning their banners and posters in a grand bonfire within the school grounds. Tragically, the fire spiraled out of control, leading to the destruction of an old school building. Firefighters spent the entire night battling the blaze. The following day, the teachers sought to make an example of someone to bear the consequences of the destructive events. Siki, having been thrust into the forefront, was singled out and expelled from the school. Shockingly, not a single student stepped up to defend him. They all remained silent, leaving Siki to be sacrificed as if he were a mere pawn. There was nothing heroic about the situation. His peers watched passively as their fellow student cried out for help, but they turned a deaf ear to his pleas. She looks at them and recounts the entire story, asking if they have any other questions. Iru stands up and inquires about the meaning behind the name Huka in issue number 2. The librarian reveals that Huka was a name chosen by Siki himself, but she is unsure of the reason behind his choice. Suddenly, Hotaru lets out a sigh and appears contemplative. He gazes at the floor and wonders how they all failed to see the true meaning behind it. He declares that Huka is simply a clever wordplay. Slowly, the librarian, Ibara, and Satoshi grasp its significance, while Iru remains puzzled. She asks Hotaru to clarify, and he proceeds to write it down on a piece of paper, causing Iru's eyes to well up with tears as she reads it. Huka, when translated directly to English, means ice cream. However, Seki deliberately used it as a wordplay on ice cream. In reality, he wanted to scream out that he wasn't the one leading the protest, that he was innocent, and that he was desperately crying for help from his fellow students. The name Huka was his way of expressing his suppressed feelings about the entire situation. Upon realizing this, Iru recollects the reason why she cried when he told her about it years ago. Her tears stemmed from the fear of being abandoned by her friends, of being left alone while she cried out for help. The thought of facing such isolation scared her deeply, and that's why she couldn't hold back her tears. After Hotaru solved the mystery, Iru thanked him, feeling relieved that she could finally find closure about her uncle's past. The following day, they gathered in the club room again, and Ibara surprised everyone by presenting a rough draft of the anthology. Iru liked it and passed it on to Hotaru to review. He jokingly complained about having to write the main portion of the story. Ibara playfully argued that since he was the one who solved the mystery, it made sense for him to write the main part and receive recognition for his efforts. Iru offered to write it for him, but Ibara intervened, insisting that he should do it himself. Reluctantly, Hotaru agreed, and Ibara instructed him to start working on the outline immediately, as time was limited. He promised to do so later that day. On their way home, Hotaru and Iru decided to walk together. During their walk, Iru expressed surprise at Hotaru accepting the task of writing the anthology article. He clarified that he didn't willingly agree but was pressured into it by the others, unable to find a way out. However, he mentioned that he would dedicate it to Seki as a tribute to him and the tragic events that he had endured. Hotaru suddenly turned to Iru and inquired why she had eventually accepted Satoshi and Ibara's assistance, despite initially being reluctant to share her personal history with others. Iru looked down and explained that she decided to confide in them because she wanted to remember that her past held significance to her. She recounted her mother's words, which suggested that with time, these experiences might feel insignificant and cause her to laugh at how much she cared about her uncle's words that once made her cry. This made Iru reflect on whether she should simply let go of the entire matter, considering it unimportant. However, after conversing with Hotaru, she realized that she wanted to hold on to these memories, no matter how insignificant they might appear. She wanted to cherish them in her heart forever. Finally, the summer vacations began, and Chitanda managed to convince Hotaru to join them for a relaxing trip to the hot springs. They all boarded a bus and left behind the bustling city life, venturing towards the calm and serene countryside. However, due to Hotaru's lack of experience in going out much, he started feeling carsick during the journey. After growing tired of waiting at a bus stop, Iru informs Hotaru that they can stay at her cousin's inn nearby due to some maintenance issues preventing other guests, with Hotaru feeling quite exhausted by the time they reach the inn. Chitanda introduces her two younger cousins, Ru and Komi, and they guide everyone to their respective rooms for a quick refresh. Satoshi, full of energy, shows Hotaru the mesmerizing view outside, and even Hotaru himself can't help but praise its beauty. However, before they can spend more time in the room, Ayako calls them for dinner, and they all head downstairs to dine together. After the meal, Hotaru returns to his room, but he realizes that Satoshi has already gone off to the hot springs. Deciding to relax, Hotaru lounges around the room and watches some TV. After a while, he grows bored and decides to join in the fun at the hot springs, as that was the main reason he came on this trip. Carrying his towels, he steps out of his room and coincidentally meets Iru in the hallway. Curious about her plans, he asks where she's heading, and she reveals that she, too, wants to take a bath in the hot springs. They walk together, and Iru mentions how Ibara seems to be really happy here, enjoying time with her sisters. She wonders why Ibara didn't come along for the bath. Eventually, they enter their respective bathhouses, and Hotaru eases himself into the springs, finding Satoshi already there. They engage in casual small talk, but suddenly Hotaru starts feeling dizzy. In a hurry, Satoshi helps him out of the water and carries him back to his room. With Ibara's assistance, they set up a mattress and lay Hotaru down, covering him with a blanket so he can rest. After some time, Iru enters the room to check on him, and Hotaru assures her that he's fine. She mentions that the others are in the next room, sharing ghost stories, and if he feels better later, he's welcome to join them. As the evening progresses, Hotaru overhears them sharing spooky tales and decides to listen in since he has nothing better to do. As Hotaru listens in, he overhears Ibara recounting an old legend about this inn. According to the tale, a troubled man once stayed in room number 7 in the other building. He paid in advance and kept to himself, refusing meals and warning the staff not to disturb him. One night, a loud scream echoed through the inn, and people rushed to find the man hanging from a rope inside his room. He had borrowed money from a company and, unable to repay it when his business failed, chose to end his life. Since that tragic incident, those who stayed in that room reportedly saw the silhouette of the deceased man hanging from the ceiling. Some even fell mysteriously ill and died during their stay. To resolve the haunting, the elder of the inn's family summoned an exorcist to perform rituals, and a new building was constructed in front of the haunted room, rendering it abandoned. After hearing the chilling story, Hotaru gets up and peeks out the window toward the room where the tragedy occurred. Feeling unsettled, he decides to close the windows and goes back to sleep. Later, he notices a small shadow moving outside the inn but dismisses it, going back to sleep again. The next day, he wakes up to a beautiful scene but fails to appreciate it fully. After breakfast, he is startled to see Ibara looking terrified. She shares that she woke up after midnight due to a gust of wind and saw the silhouette of a man hanging from the ceiling in room number 7. During breakfast, they tease Ibara, suggesting that she might have imagined the silhouette due to the scary stories. Surprisingly, Eru reveals that she also saw the same figure hanging from the ceiling. Hotaru remains skeptical, dismissing it as a misunderstanding. This angers Ibara, and she demands to know what else she could have seen in that window. Eru becomes intrigued and convinces Hotaru to help her investigate further. They head back to Hotaru's room, where he asks Eru several questions about what she saw. They decide to go to room number 7 for a closer look, but when they ask Maya to guide them, she becomes uneasy and refuses to accompany them. Later, they venture below the window outside, where Hotaru notices signs of recent rain. While investigating, Maya suddenly appears and tells them she cannot take them to room number 7 before fleeing. Back at the dining area for lunch, Ibara emerges wearing a kimono that she seems to really like. Satoshi pulls Hotaru aside and mentions that Maya seems to admire the kimono but is not allowed to try it on. In the midst of their conversation, Hotaru senses someone looking at them from behind. When he turns around, however, there's no one at the door, leaving him puzzled about what happened. Deciding to join Eru at the hot springs, Hotaru encounters Satoshi there as well. Satoshi casually mentions that there were loud drums playing late into the night, but Hotaru slept through it all. Suddenly, Hotaru looks around and inquires if yesterday was the day of the summer festival in the area. Satoshi confirms that it was indeed the festival day. Putting the pieces together, Hotaru walks back with Eru to explain what she saw the previous night. He clarifies that it wasn't a hanging man's silhouette but the outline of a drying kimono. Eru looks surprised, and Hotaru further explains that since Ibara doesn't allow Maya to handle her belongings, Maya took the kimono without permission and went to the festival. The shadow that Hotaru saw was Maya running outside of the inn. As luck would have it, Maya's plan to enjoy the summer festival got interrupted by rain, forcing her to return to the inn. With the kimono soaked, she faced a dilemma of wearing it early the next morning, so she sneaked into room number 7, knowing it was abandoned, and hung the kimono there to dry. This explains what both Eru and Ibara saw and found unsettling. Now everything makes perfect sense, and once again, Eru is amazed by Hotaru's deductive abilities. Eru expresses pity for Maya, who had to resort to such measures just to wear a kimono. As they observe Maya and Ibara helping each other in the distance, Eru runs happily towards them in the sunset, appreciating the bond between siblings. On the other hand, Hotaru walks slowly, anticipating the mysteries the future might hold for him.